Can you hear us? And that's it, Chair, we should be live.
Right, afternoon. It's nice to see you all. Long time no see. So I call this meeting started. Any apologies of absence, please? We've just got the one, I presume.
Yes, Chair. Councillor David Downs has submitted his apologies. And just so that you're aware, in the meeting room with us today, we have Councillor Andrew Dewsbury, Councillor Tricia Clough, Councillor Clive Mosby, Councillor Deborah Watson and Councillor James Watson. Yourself, obviously, Chair, Mrs Ruth Jeffrey as our independent person, and supporting the committee today, you have the Monitoring Officer, Sarah Sternberg, the Deputy Monitoring Officer, Victoria Dawson, myself, the Governance Manager, Nicola Calver, and Alison Bluff, Governance Officer, as clerk in this meeting.
Right, do we have any urgent items of business?
No, Chair.
Right, we'll go on to item number 3, declarations of interest. Do anybody have any declarations of interest? I take that as a no then.
Councillor James Watson is indicating he'd like to speak, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Hello?
Thank you. Just there's an item later on the agenda about the High Hedges Committee. Just to say that as a member of the High Hedges Committee, I've been part of the consultation.
Right, thank you very much. Then we go on to item number 4, the minutes of the last meeting. I take it we've all had the agenda. Have you all read the minutes of the last meeting?
Yes.
Yes. Right then, do we have any, do we take them as a true, I wasn't there at the last meeting, as I give my apologies, I've just come out of hospital, so do we take that as a true minutes of the last meeting that was taken on the 24th of February?
I'll move the minutes, Chair.
I'll second those, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I have a vote, please?
Chair, can I just come in? I've got a couple of bits to raise on the minutes, but I'll do it later on in the agenda, if I may, please, under work programme.
Right.
And I'll abstain on the minutes, please.
Right. So
And
can I...
recorded, please.
Is that being recorded? Thank you very much. Right, can we go on to then item number 5, please, which is Local Government Association Model Code of Conduct and Consultation.
Thank you, Chair. That's me. So circulated to your members is a report to inform the committee of the LGA's consultation on their model code of conduct and to provide an opportunity for the committee to raise any comments that officers can submit on your behalf in a response. The consultation commenced on the 8th of June, runs until the 17th of August. The draft model is attached to Appendix 1 to the report, and a comparison to the Council Code is attached to Appendix 2. The draft model code doesn't differ particularly to the content on the local code already in operation, although some of the language used is different. I would say maybe slightly more succinct. I draw your attention to the fact the LGA have drafted the code incorporating recommendations from the Parliamentary Committee on Standards in Public Life's recommendations on local government ethical standards. If these are adopted and incorporated, it would mean the code would apply to members where they are acting or claiming or giving the impression they are acting in public or in their capacity as a member representative of the council. A final version of the model code is expected at some time, possibly autumn, and we'll bring this back to the committee to accept the model code, maybe make some amendments to our own local code, or maybe something in between. Thank you, Chair.
Do I have any questions? Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Watson, can I have you first and then go on?
Councillor Deborah Watson, I think, was first.
I'm sorry. Can I have Councillor Deborah Watson first then, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, James, for that. Yeah, can I just ask, you say the draft code to compare with is included in our paperwork. It's the only one I've got in mind is the North East Derbyshire one. I'm assuming ours is pretty much the same, but why have we got that one in our pack?
My apologies, that's an editing error. It is in fact the Bolsover Code of Conduct. They are exactly the same document. I do apologise, that's a typographical error in your paperwork.
Anything else, Councillor Watson, Deborah Watson? Councillor James Watson, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Jaffrey. So what I was expecting to see in the LGA code, which I couldn't see, but it may be my error, was that I understood from the Committee on Public Life that there was going to be the introduction of an objective standard. So I think Mrs. Sternberg often tells us about the person on the Clapham omnibus, and I couldn't see that in the draft code. Is that my error or misunderstanding?
I've not seen that, Councillor Watson. So I think you do understand that correctly. I don't recall seeing that in the model code.
Because the point of it would be that we move towards a more objective test with regard to code of conduct, complaints and standards. And that's what I thought the committee was addressing, because, and certainly from the evidence given to the committee and what is given to me as a district councillor, is that the standards, the code of conduct and the standards of complaints seem to be very weak, and people, you know, generally in contact with me would like to see it strengthened. And I thought that that was part of the remit of the Committee on Public Standards in Public Life.
I could come into this one. Yes, you're quite right, it is perceived as weak. Part of that weakness is perceived as it only applies to the councillor when acting as a councillor, and certainly this draft seeks to extend that beyond to where somebody is giving the impression they're acting as a councillor, which is particularly pertinent to social media, where there can be confusion between. The sanctions are the main point of your question, and I don't think there's anything in here that proposes a change to the sanctions, but I do know that there is lobbying going on of governments to make changes to bring back something of what we had before 2011, which was suspension for 3 months, etc. So the sanctions are being looked at.
Yes, Mr. Watson. Oh.
So for our comments, because we're formulating the comments at this stage, to go back. So I would like this committee, if other members are willing to support me, to go that generally we would like to see the standards firmed up, and particularly an objective test, which I understood, you know, from the Committee on Standards in Public Life was going to be included, but that should be included along with more clear instructions, because for instance, on the level code, on the code at the moment, it seems to me, and others may disagree, that again, there's a lot of interpretation required on such things as bullying, harassment, which I think is a new introduction to the code. So generally, the weakness I perceive the code of conduct to be is that it's subject to quite a large degree of interpretation, and I think we need to generally get some consistency across. Also, what I would like to see, and whether the members of the committee support me, is that decisions are published, because in some monitoring areas, some monitoring officers publish their decisions. Most notably, seems to me to be down in the southwest, with Cornwall and Devon leading the way, so that people can see how these complaints have progressed. And I would also, whereas here in this authority, we don't publish anything. So it would seem to me that in the code that there would be a useful thing about authorities publishing their decisions, so that people could see how the complaints were being handled in that authority. And again, it would be more open and transparent from my perspective. But obviously, other members of the committee might wish to comment on that. Thank you, Mrs. Jaffrey.
Thank you. Any more questions, please? Anybody? Yes, Councillor Andrew. Can't see what your surname is.
This social media thing, I think that opens up a can of worms. It's going to be very difficult to police for a start. But there's been a recent case of from Councillor Jane Bryson, where she was on social media, and some of the people were asking her questions. She was answering questions, and there were other people who disagreed with it, were putting complaints in about it. Like so it's subjective. So I don't know how you would perceive the complaint on from social media. I think that's a really difficult one to police and so on.
Yes, Sarah's monitoring officer, you'd like to come back?
Yes, please. Just on that particular point, social media is very difficult to police, but often we find that parish or district members are using their councillor address for social media. With the changes proposed in this code, it is very likely that will bring it within inclusion within the code and clarify that point.
Do I have anybody? Yes, Deborah Watson.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand sort of on conversations with, I can't remember who it was I spoke with, it might even have been the police, that actually it is very easy for somebody to create a fake profile on social media, literally just by taking somebody's photograph off their own actual social media page and creating a new one. So if you were going to, undertake sanctions against any councillor, there would be a burden of proof there to ensure that it actually is them who's made that posting and that it is from their own social media page. That would be quite difficult to police, wouldn't it? In fact, that happened in the past, didn't it, Sarah, if you recall, with Brian Murray Carr?
Sorry, my memory fails me. I'm sure you're right. But just to come in on that point, it is a complaints-led system. There's nothing in here to change that. So it would be dependent on a complaint coming in. And clearly we address talking to the member who's the subject of the complaint as well. And the first thing they would say is, that's not my page, that's a fake. So we would be on notice straight away.
Any more questions, anybody?
I think Councillor Clough would like to ask a question.
Councillor Clough?
Councillor Clough, it's not so much a question, it's more to say that yes, I would like to see more clarity and consistency along with Councillor James Watson. Some of the things do seem a bit airy-fairy. When it comes to bullying, there are all sorts of bullying, and we just need more clarity in that. Bullying can be excluding people from events. There's a wide range of things that can be classed as that. So yes, we need more clarity.
If I might come back.
Yes.
Just a couple of things. I think Councillor James Watson referred to bullying being new. It's actually coming back. It was in the code at some point in the past, but it is also very well understood, particularly in the employment context. And there's a good deal of evidence in the employment context of what that is and what amounts to bullying. So we have that to rely on. The second thing is, basic thing I'm getting here is that as and when this code of conduct is sorted, we need to supply more guidance on what it actually means. And I think it's rather than clarity in the, although there may be points within the code we need clarity on, but rather than that, it is actually the supporting guidance to members that we need to concentrate on when this comes in.
Right. Any more questions, anybody?
Yeah, I'll just go into, yeah, I agree, Councillor Mulgrew, I do totally agree with what Sarah said. This is the guidance really for the implementation of the code at the end of the day. Not only for members to be able to understand, if they're doing anything wrong, why they're doing it, but also for anybody who might be investigating a complaint. We do need some sort of standard format so that everybody gets investigated at that same level within it all. And, like Councillor Watson and Councillor Josby and others before us, I don't mind, I often quote Sarah on the Clapham Omnibus thing, and, how would that look for that person on that upstairs bus? And I think that in there is a good guide for members to be able to decide where they're going, what they're doing, and is it the right thing to do. But I certainly don't have any objections to trying to make it a bit more easy to understand, a bit more guidance within it all, and maybe a bit more tightened up in certain areas. Thank you.
Any more questions, anybody?
Yeah, me, please.
Yeah. Yeah, go on.
I'm also not very fussed on having complaints and procedures published. You get complaints that are frivolous for a start. You also can get complainants that want to remain anonymous. So that's like a double standard. If one's got to remain anonymous, how can you have it published? That means it'll be all one-sided.
Yeah, I think it's the case that we're going to have to wait for more guidance when it comes out, more clarity and how it's going to happen.
And if I might, Chair, I think Councillor James Watson mentioned Cornwall. We'll have a look at Cornwall and Devon. We'll have a look at what they publish with a view to coming back to members to show you what they publish.
Right. Is there any more questions on this one? So
Yes.
can I, yeah,
Councillor James Watson.
I think my sort of comment to Councillor Josbury would be that we are in public life, and that when one makes a complaint against somebody in public life, that's one matter. And so because you are in public life and you're subject to various standards, then, you know, I think it's important that people do know how that complaint has been progressed. And there's a distinguish. I mean, you may want to have a finesse in the publication that, for instance, if people aren't willing to declare, you know, who they are, then that particular complaint is not published. But I don't think that it should be a broad brush, because certainly what I'm finding across the district is that people are coming to me and saying, you know, why is this not published? You know, it just goes into a black hole or various things like that. And so if this discussion is to bring forward comments, then I would like that comment to go forward. Or if it's to go on a committee basis, Chair, I don't know, you're going to adjudicate that for our comments to be forwarded to the Local Governments Association, I imagine. Then, you know, obviously it's how the committee feels about publication as a whole.
Sarah, what do you think about that? How do we go on with that?
Well, if members want to respond to the consultation as a committee, what I suggest is that you send your comments through, other than the ones we've picked up today in the debate, and we'll put them together in a letter before the deadline. And I agree with you as chair. If that's what you want to do, or do you wish to reply separately? Or reply separately?
Yes, Councillor Watson.
Well, I think from our perspective, it would be stronger if we spoke as a committee, you know, and those are, you know, my elements. I don't think, you know, after all, this is being put forward as considerations, and then, you know, it comes back to this committee. So if people perhaps are worried, you know, so I think at this stage, it would be quite useful as a committee to reflect all views, because that would go forward. And then obviously as it comes back and how that is applied to this authority, then there's another opportunity for this committee to address that, how it is applied in this authority. So overall, I think it should go forward as a committee, but include all views expressed.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly got a note of the views, so we can put something together and send that out before the deadline, which is 17th of August.
Chair, could I ask that before it's sent, you know, in response to this deadline, that all committee members see what we're sending back before and have a comment on it at that stage, please?
Yeah, that's fine.
Can I comment?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, I support that. I totally agree. You know, a joint committee comment would carry more clout, I would have thought. I don't have a problem with the publishing of complaints against councillors, as long as you know, the publication of any complaints would include a note where complaints have actually been vexatious rather than a genuine complaint. I think all those details must be included so that the public get a broader view of the complaints going in, not just ones necessarily that are upheld. Okay.
Right, I think we need to go forward now. So I take it that we all want to put in a joint from that as the committee, what you feel about this proposal. So I would suggest you get an email sent in to Sarah, who will collate all the information, and it will be posted out just before the deadline. So can I have initially someone to second and propose this, and then we'll have a vote, please?
I'll propose that course of action, Mrs. Jeffrey.
I'll
And-
second that.
And can I have a vote, please? Right. Then can we go on to the next item, which is the review of the council's constitution, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've recirculated to you the first of a series of reports that come to the Standards Committee, which suggests revisions to the Constitution. Within it are rationale, and this is for your scrutiny and subsequent recommendations onto Council if you would like it adopting. At 1.2 in the report, it sets out a list of areas already identified for review for the forthcoming year, and at 1.4, these are put into tabular format, giving a guideline of when they might come before you for consideration. So today you're looking at some revisions to the contract procedure rules, the disestablishment of the High Hedges Committee, an update on the Safety Committee, which is just typographical errors and name changes, and other changes that were taken under delegated decision during the lockdown period as emergency changes required to keep the business running. And that was changes to the council procedure rules to include virtual meetings and the delegation scheme. I'm happy to help with any queries members might have, Chair.
Do I have any questions, please? Yes, Councillor Watson, James Watson.
So if you could help me with the contract procedure rules. Is that all right?
Yeah.
So I found it difficult reading the contract procedure rules on the screen. I just want to give that, to start with. But what I couldn't see with the contract procedure rules, and I don't know if that should be included here or is included elsewhere, I do apologise, is the publication of various contractual arrangements. So for instance, or how things have gone. So for instance, the council let a very substantial contract for 32 million under delegated powers around Easter. And the delegated decision said that all contractual proceedings have been taken forward and so on and so forth. Yet I've been unable to find those tender process and tender documents. And I wonder there in the contract procedure rules, whether there is any element of once the contract has been let, that how that contract came to be is published. Because if it is, then that's good, and it's just remiss on me that I can't find them. But for instance, on that particular example where we've let out one of the largest contracts, £32 million for the housing, then all I got from the delegated decision is that a rigorous contract decision went through, and I can't seem to find it. Now that may be my error. Is that covered by the contract procedure rules about things being published? Or is it just remiss of me?
If I could, Chair?
Yeah.
No, it's not remiss of you at all, Councillor Watson. The council has to publish under the transparency agenda a lot of the contracts, if not all the contracts, in fact over £500. So and the procurement team certainly advertises a lot of these in advance of them being let as well. I think your question is more related to the detail on the DD, on the delegated decision, and perhaps wanting more detail about how it was completed. I do try to ask people who exercise in delegation to put a full report where it's a large complex area, but unfortunately they don't always do that. No, there's nothing in the contract procurement rules other than what you've read that would require that advertisement, because as I say, it's part of the transparency agenda and we tend to do it anyway.
Because as you may be aware, I was trying to, because that contract just went beyond scrutiny. Because in the interim, I was trying to formulate with the Director of Corporate Services various remote meetings and couldn't do that because he told me it wasn't part of his priorities. But in the interim, that contract was let and whatever. So apart from when one looks at those contracts, how do ones peruse those to see that basically everything, which I'm sure it has, but nevertheless that's the point of scrutiny, as everything's been performed correctly?
If I might, Chair, the decision was no less subject to a call-in for scrutiny purposes than it would have been had it been decided by the executive. So the same rules applied, and I think we saw that recently with the call-in. That one was on the sale of the land at Park Avenue. That was called in. Basically, you should ask the particular officer the question. If it leads to a discussion here about what we put in delegated decisions or the contract procurement rules, that's helpful. But really, it should be you ask the officer making the delegation. Words coming out wrong. Exercising the delegation to explain what went on and what happened.
Okay. And so from your perspective there, that doesn't need to be included in the contract procedure rules, or is it a valid increase to put in the contract procedure rules?
I think it would be helpful to have more detail. As I say, I do try to encourage people to put a full report in explaining what's happened. So in the case of delegation, I would expect to see something akin to what goes to executive committee, but it doesn't always happen, no.
So is it valid for me to suggest an amendment to the contract procedure rules to take that into account?
Yes, if you would leave them form a methodology for it to us to work out, that would be fine. But yes, you can suggest that.
So I'd like to suggest that, if that's all right, Mrs. Jeffrey, to amend the contract procedure rules in that vein, subject to Mrs. Sternberg's point about the detail being fully worked out. But as a general theme, I would like that included in the contract procedure rules.
Can I ask if anybody else has any thought on this, please? Councillor Mosley? Did you want to say anything?
No, not me. Sorry, no. I'll take my mic off. Sorry.
Right then, I think Sarah's taken note of your comment, Mr. Councillor Watson. So yeah. I will propose that we can I have someone second and propose these review of the Constitution, please.
So are we taking all 3 points together, or just the contract procedure rules? There's 3 points, isn't there?
Oh.
There's the High Hedges,
So
and there's the Safety Committee.
Chair, could I suggest, I think Councillor Watson's right, that as we've discussed the contracts procedure rules, if we take those first and then take the other 2 items one by one.
Yeah, we'll take the contracts procedure rules then.
So I would like to propose, subject to the caveat that I've just mentioned, then I would like to propose that for the contract procedure rules, if someone wishes to second me.
Anybody?
I'll second that.
And can I have a vote, please? Right. Can we go on to the next one then, please? So I take that vote to be counted. Can we go on to the next part of it, please, which is the chair? Yes, Councillor Watson, do you want to?
Yes, just as I mentioned before, I am a member of the High Hedges Committee, and so I have been consulted, and I did basically put forward that the High Hedges Committee should be disestablished.
And that is indeed what's being proposed, and it's being substituted by a delegated power.
Right. Anybody else got any questions on this matter? Right, can I have someone second and propose this, please?
I'll second
I'll
it.
propose that.
And can I have a vote then, please? Thank you. Then the Safety Committee then, please, is the next one.
As I recall from what the governance manager said, this is just a question of tidying up the language.
Do I have any questions? Do I have any questions on the Safety Committee? No questions. Then can I have someone second and propose it, please?
I'll propose it.
I'll second it.
And then can I have a vote, please? Thank you very much. Then it's complaints update, please.
Thank you, Chair. this is where we do actually publish numbers, but not details. We've had 10 complaints since the beginning of the year. Three of them have been concluded with no further action being taken, and 5 are for one particular parish council. But of those 10, 7 remain outstanding.
Do I have any questions on this? Anybody? Yes, Councillor Watson.
Well, it comes as no surprise given my earlier conversation, but I do think that having some detail on these reports would be helpful. I've had a number of comments basically about complaints going up to the monitoring officer and various other officers where it's come back as said, I've had a conversation with the independent person and no further action is required. And they've reflected to me that that isn't a particularly useful way of discharging a complaint, particularly as they cannot determine, what the reasons being was. And then there's a standard paragraph which basically refers them to the local government ombudsman. So from my perspective, I do think, and obviously linking it to the previous conversation, that if we could, publish, as other councils seemingly do, that certainly what has been reflected to me across the district, it's not just my particular, the south part of the district, but across the district, about how we handle complaints and whether we could look forward and look towards publishing the reasons why, for instance, particular, and I take all the points about vexatious payments raised by other members and all that sort of stuff, but nevertheless, on a point of open and transparency, why, that particular complaint wasn't taken forward, or, and people could see, because what my argument would be here is that you could see the trends, you could see how they were discharged. And we're all in public life and we have to take that people are going to make complaints against us and so on and so forth. But I think that, overall for the movement and of the people who elected us to be in these posts, that would be a way to progress this. And I don't accept previous comments, where I've said there's no reason why we should publish things that have been adjudicated on. I think there is a reason, and that's the confidence of the process for our electors in the complaints system. That's my point of view. That's what I'd argue.
Chair, can I come back? The reason we don't give you chapter and verse when they're ongoing is because they may come to you as a hearing. But I take your point with concluded complaints. I don't see any reason why we couldn't do an annual report giving some detail. I think we need to look at Cornwall and Devon to look at how they do it, because I am concerned about data protection type issues. So we would need to explore that fully. But they're even anonymised, we could give some reasons what the nature of the complaint was and why and the independent person decided it wasn't meriting an investigation, because an investigation is only done for the most serious of offences, the most serious of complaints. Generally, we're looking to settle it some other way because of the level of complaint is not such as to require such a complex and expensive measure. And I also point out that the only 2 people who deal with these, with the independent persons, are myself as monitoring officer and my deputy Vicky Dawson as deputy monitoring officer. There's nobody else who's involved. It would be one of the 2 of us.
Any questions? Yes, Councillor Watson.
I'm quite supportive of that. I think, as we move towards the fact, of gaining the confidence, and for instance, we might get something with the LGA code of conduct as well that helps. But generally, what I'm picking up is a general lack of confidence in the system. And then as part of the standards committee, I think we have to, other members might want to dismiss that and say, there is a lot of confidence around, about complaints and so on and so forth. It's just that's what I'm picking up, and therefore that's what I'm reflecting. So I think if we move towards that, so I'm quite supportive of what Mrs. Sirleaf has just said. I think, and it's a progression, and I think as long as we progress along that route, that's the right way of doing it.
Any more questions, please? Right, so can I have somebody, do we take a vote on this one?
We just ordinarily note it, so I'll move that it's noted.
Right, then the next one is item number 8. It's the work programme for the remainder of this year and next year.
Thank you, Chair. So attached for item 8 is your work plan for the forthcoming year. This is a live document. You can add to it at any point or amend it, dependent on whether you feel that they are the right things coming to you at the right time, Chair. So I'm happy to take any amendments to that item.
Could I just come in, Ms Jeffries, Councillor Mosby, as regards the comment when we went through the minutes earlier on? There are actually 2 items on the minute 0672 on page 6, which is, if you remember, prior to lockdown, we were going to get independent members or parish, sorry, and town councillors as members of the standards committee. I'd like this to be put back on work programme because obviously it slipped a bit, and the timetable should have been that we should have been deciding this on the the AGM in May of this year. So I'd like to add that to our next work programme, 28th of September, I think it is. And also minute number 0676, which is about member champions. We had quite a few bits of meetings with Sarah Steinberg, Monitor Officer, and one or others on this. And maybe could we put that back onto the work programme again for the September meeting, so we can get some clarity as to where we're going with that, please. Thank you.
If I could, Chair.
Yes.
I've no problem with putting both items back on the work programme. Sorry, we've missed them. But can we make the parish council representatives of this committee later in the year with a view to going to the annual meeting next year? The reason I ask is we've got these virtual meetings until May 21. Parish councillors are not necessarily set up to deal with them. And I worry that they will feel disenfranchised because it's all this technology that they don't know about. I'd rather start, go through the process in advance, but start with them from the next annual meeting.
Yeah, through your chair, yeah, happy to do that. It's just so we don't let it slip and lose it anyway, that's all. Yeah, happy with that.
Thanks. Thank you.
Do we have a date for the next meeting, virtual meeting?
Yes, the 28th of September.
Will that be 2 o'clock again?
I believe so. Yeah.
Thank you. So I will now call this meeting a close then. Thank you all for participating. And I think as it was our first meeting, it went reasonably well.
Thank you.